In the small town of Hartville, forgotten among the pale hills and the trees that whispered ancient secrets, the public library stood like a stubborn monument to the past. Built of stone darkened by time, it seemed more like a shrine than a functional building. Its tall, dusty windows filtered the sunlight in silent, almost reverent beams. There was nothing there that screamed for attention, and perhaps that was why it was ignored by most. As if the town, in its rush to keep up with the modern world, had forgotten the value of silence. Every morning before the church bell even announced 7 o'clock, he was there, the janitor. No one knew his real name, though his crumpled name tag said E. Miller. He was a slender man with a leisurely walk, shoulders slightly hunched by time or life, and eyes that avoided anyone else's. He always wore the same worn coat, gray as the fog that envelops Hartville on certain winter mornings. His presence caused neither surprise nor curiosity. He was like an old piece of furniture, useful but invisible. The town children sometimes mocked him through the windows of the reading room, calling him Mr. Dust. The adults, however, simply ignored him. To the residents, Miller was just part of the building's furniture. He was there when the library opened, he cleaned the aisles, he organized the books, and he disappeared when the day was over. No one asked questions, no one wanted answers. But there was something in his steps, silent, careful, almost choreographed, that betrayed a broader past in that corridor of musty books. He walked as if he were waiting for traps. Notice how he was waiting for movement where there shouldn't be. And as much as he tried to appear disinterested, he knew by heart the names and faces of everyone who entered that building. The library for him was not just a building, it was a sanctuary, and also perhaps a prison. On the shelves, besides the forgotten novels and outdated encyclopedias, were traces of lives that no one remembered anymore. Letters left between the pages, pen marks in the margins, notes hidden inside children's books. Miller collected all these traces with the delicacy of someone who knows the value of silence and memory. One morning, amidst the usual monotony, something changed. A book that shouldn't have been there appeared on the central reading table. An old copy with a red cover, untitled, with burnt edges and the symbol of an eagle engraved in bas relief. It was a book he knew, one that would never have come back. His fingers hesitated for a moment before touching it. The silence of the library seemed to grow thicker, as if the walls were listening. When I opened the cover, I found exactly what I had feared, a yellowed fourfold paper with a single handwritten sentence. "He's back." There was no signature. I don't need it. Miller felt the world spin around him. It wasn't fear, but a bitter recognition. For almost 20 years, he believed that this had happened, that this part of his life was buried forever among codes, silences, and pacts. But the warning was clear. Someone was trying to bring him back. In the days that followed, he tried to keep up his routine. He swept the hallways, cleaned the front steps, and went over the specifications in old files. But his mind was already elsewhere, hearing invisible sounds, remembering forgotten codes, reviving names he had long ago pretended to have erased. Every person who entered the library was a potential threat. Every curious glance, a clue in disguise. And the red book disappeared as mysteriously as it had appeared. One afternoon, a woman he had never seen before came in. She was wearing a navy blue overcoat, her hair tied back, and sunglasses despite the confined space. She walked with the certainty of someone who knew what she was looking for, straight to the military history section. Miller watched in silence, pretending to clean the windows. She didn't take any books. She simply slipped a white envelope discreetly between 2 encyclopedias and left without looking back. That night, when everyone had gone, he went up to the bookshelf and found the envelope. Inside was just a photo. In it was the face of a man Miller had believed dead, a scar across his eyebrow and eyes that could see him even through the paper. And on the back of the photo was another short message: "You are still needed." The piece of Hartville, as shallow as a still pond, was beginning to crack. He knew what it meant. He knew that someone, somewhere, wanted to reopen old wounds. But what worried him most was not the man in the photo. It was the fact that he himself was beginning to remember too much. He was beginning to feel again the weight of choices, the taste of blood, the heat of decisions that shaped the course of stories the world had never known. That invisible man everyone despised was waking up, and when he fully woke up, the world would realize, too late, that Hartville held more than dusty books. It held a ghost from the past, a master of the occult, and perhaps the last guardian of a truth that should never be revealed. For the next few days, Miller's routine remained, at least to the eyes of others, unchanged. He still cleaned the windows in the morning, straightened the chairs in the reading room, and organized the returned books with an almost obsessive precision. But inside him, something was quietly crumbling, like an ancient structure being pressed from the inside out. The presence of the envelope in the photo was not an isolated incident. Other signs began to appear, always subtle, always where only he could notice. A book with a page deliberately dog-eared in the philosophy section, a prominent quote about the hidden truths of order, a bookmark that did not belong to the collection, but bore the seal of an organization he had sworn never to speak aloud again. One night, while going through the old records in the library's basement, a dusty archive where boxes dating back to the 1920s sat on rickety shelves, he found something even more disturbing, a file with his real name on it, the name no one in Hartville knew, the name he had buried along with his old life. Inside the envelope was a detailed report, classified operations, coded locations, dated missions, and at the bottom of each page, the signature of someone he had believed dead for more than a decade. L. Just one letter, but enough to make the back of his neck prickle. Meanwhile, the library's visitors began to change. Longtime regulars dwindled. In their place were unfamiliar faces, men in gray suits with too calm voices, women with sharp eyes who walked the aisles without ever choosing a book. Everyone left something behind, a visual note, a symbol scratched discreetly into the wood of the shelves, or a book placed upside down on the right shelf. The library was being used, once again. In his youth, Miller was not a janitor. He was a strategist, a man trained to manipulate patterns, hide messages in old systems, and disappear without a trace. He belonged to a shadow network of the government, an unofficial division that operated in the shadows between diplomacy and destruction. But after a disastrous operation and the betrayal of someone he considered a brother, he faked his own death and hid in the only fortress that still valued silence. Hartville was his penance and his protection. But now the wall had been breached. He began taking precautions. He installed small devices among the books. Nothing electronic, just markers that would change position if someone moved certain sections. He began tracking the movements of visitors with mathematical precision. And every night, when he turned out the lights, he would lock himself in the small back room with a black notebook. There he would record every event, every face, every anomaly. Until one night, he discovered something impossible. On the upper floor of the library, there was a door that had been locked for years. Room 7, as it was called on the old maps of the building, was officially an archive condemned by the Foundation, in danger of collapse. But that day, when he went upstairs to check on a noise he swore he had heard, the door was ajar. Inside, the dust looked as if it had been recently swept. The boxes were rearranged, and in the center of the room, a chair. Someone had been there, sitting, waiting. He did not enter. Not now. He backed away slowly, locked the door, and sealed it with a disguised piece of tape. But in that moment, he knew this was no longer a visit. It was an occupation. The next day, he received an envelope with no return address in his mailbox, something that never happened. Inside was a sheet of paper with 3 lines. The order has slept too long. Your absence has been noted. The guardian must return to the circle. No signature, no clues. That night, he went to the back of the library. Behind a bookcase held in place by screws and sealed with old paint, there was a safe built into the wall. a secret from his installation there, years ago, when he had chosen this building to disappear into. He punched in the code. The safe opened with a dull click. Inside was an old holster, a small leather journal, and an iron key with spiral engravings. The journal had no names, only coordinates, encrypted phrases, and emergency instructions. The key was to a compartment he hoped he would never have to open again, located in the basement of an abandoned government building in Albany. But he knew this was no longer a choice. In the days that followed, he followed clues in the books, deciphered messages hidden in old newspaper articles, and tracked the movements of the infiltrators around the city. With each night, the tension grew. There was an unspoken countdown. A convergence was approaching, and then the explosion came. On Monday morning at 6:17, the east wing of the library partially collapsed. A gas leak, the newspaper said. An accident. But Miller knew better. It was a warning, a test, a reminder that no one was safe. That night, when the alarm went off and the police arrived, the woman in the blue coat was among the onlookers. Miller recognized her. She stared at him for less than a second, long enough for him to realize time was up. He went home, showered, dressed as he had 20 years ago. He pulled an old box from under his bed where he kept sealed documents and the last photo of his original team. Everyone was dead, except him and maybe Elle. The next morning, he didn't show up at the library. The chair sat empty. The town murmured. The police thought it was odd, but no one really cared. To them, he was just an old janitor who disappeared out of nowhere. But somewhere on the East Coast, a man was moving in the shadows again. The library was at war, and the Guardian had awakened. 3 weeks after Miller's disappearance, the Hartville Library remained closed. Boards covered the East Wing, and city workers, or at least those disguised as such, roamed around the clock with scanning equipment that didn't follow any civil protocol. The town murmured, but there were no answers. Miller's absence was eventually swallowed up in silence, except for one person. She returned. The woman in the blue coat, now wearing a scarf around her neck and a pin with the symbol of the circle. She slipped quietly into the room with the sealed-off records, the same one Miller had locked weeks before. Inside, she lit a single match. Then she whispered. He answered. Deep in the Albany basement, a meeting was underway. 4 men and 2 women, all with cold expressions and black folders in front of them. On an old monitor, a satellite image froze over the Hartville Library. One of the men typed as he spoke. We've activated all markers. He unlocked 3 channels. The 4th sequence appeared in the old code Southwest Antenna. Only someone with the original key could do that. Silence. Then the screen changed. A video captured from a hacked security camera showed Miller entering an abandoned building. Behind him, a figure with a cane and a hat. The legacy is active. He has chosen to return. The mission was underway. Early the following Wednesday morning, unidentified military helicopters circled the county. But there was no official broadcast. There was no panic, only shadows passing over the sleeping city. At the same time, inside a base hidden beneath the rubble of a paper mill, Miller stared at a circular table. Above it, old files, now released, brought the true reasons for the order's collapse. The betrayal wasn't just internal. The network had been compromised by something bigger, a shadow government manipulation structure that used the order as a puppet. And at its center, Elle, its mentor who, contrary to what Miller believed, was alive and in charge of everything. The Guardian couldn't just warn the world. He needed to bring the system down from within. He gathered 3 trusted remnants. They assumed new identities. They infiltrated central structures of the network that monitored sensitive information in the United States. They planted codes in public libraries, museums, and universities. The new order didn't need weapons. It needed memory, data. And then, on New Year's Eve, the attack began. Not a bombshell, but a revelation. In more than 70 libraries across the United States, Secret files were displayed on the internal systems, dossiers containing evidence of corruption, of manipulation, of silent executions, of truths erased by the official story. Newspapers tried to cover it up. TV channels ignored it. But the internet never forgets. Miller's name has surfaced on forums as a ghost, as a myth, as the librarian who woke the archives. Meanwhile, L realized he had lost control, and he sent a special team to capture the traitor. On the night of the final confrontation, Miller returned to the library. It was dark, silent, but he knew every step of the way, every creaking board, every blind spot to the cameras. When the agents entered, they were certain he would be easy to subdue, but they forgot who he was. Within minutes, the intruders were disarmed, confused, trapped in their own traps. And in the center of the library, in room 7, Miller activated the final channel, a hidden transmitter that had never been found, not even by the old order. There he left his last message to the world. I have been called a janitor, invisible, replaceable, a man sweeping the dust from memory. But I was more. I am more. I am the keeper of truth. And you should never have woken the library. The next morning, the library was empty. Miller had disappeared, but everywhere discrete marks began to appear in books, underlined phrases, codes in the footnotes of newspapers. The new generation of the order had been born, and its legend began now.